Welcome to Breaking Barriers. You know your path. We know the obstacles, and we can teach you how to tear them down. And now your host, CEO and founder of Adapting Social, John Vigero.
Joe, thank you so much for being here today. Obviously you've been in the real estate game, for quite some time. In addition to that, obviously, you have huge ties to Staten Island, your family, a family business there. One of the major questions, so when we have new guests on the podcast, typically we put it out to our listeners, and sometimes they have some questions, so we have a bunch of good stuff, obviously, for you here today. But primarily, I want to know, for people that are watching this, give them the high level of who Joe is.
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm a native Staten Islander, and actually my parents are native Staten Islanders.
Wow.
So I don't know if you just heard the clicking and stuff. I think we lost half your audience because it's like, this is about Staten Island. I don't want to talk about Staten Island. But that's a cruel fact. And also, to lose the other half,
right.
I'm also a Republican who's run for office twice as a Republican. Yeah. Once in 2014 for Assembly, and then in 2022 for Senate. So what that means is I'm very, very active in the community. Right. And I've always been active in the community. Yeah. So Joe Tirone, if you ask a Staten Islander who's Joe Tirone, they're probably going to say his parents and his uncles owned a shoe store. Okay. Which was Tirone Shoe Store, which was a very popular shoe store that was in operation for 62 years, from 49. Yes, to 2011.
That is a lot of time.
Yeah, and my father and my two uncles all retired when they were all close. One was already 90. My father was almost 90. Oh wow! And then the other one was 85. Wow! And so they really worked hard to serve the community, and they really did. And my father was a pretty big activist. He was the store was located in an area in Staten Island called Port Richmond. Okay. And Port Richmond saw a decline in the 1970s when the mall opened up. Okay. So Staten Island, going back to Staten Island that far back is pretty amazing, because it was a totally different scenario up until really the 70s when the mall was built. And the mall was built over what was an airport. So Staten Island actually had an airport. So
really? Was it a small private one?
Yeah. Small airport, yeah.
Got it.
But it was and when I was a kid, we used to go there, watch the planes land and take off and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So it has a very interesting history. And as a native Staten Islander, of course, I love Staten Island. I've always loved Staten Island, big advocate for it. Yeah. And that's one of the things that I think that really got Compass interested in me as a person first, and then as a realtor second, was that my ties to the community and how I advocate so strongly for the community in several different ways. Obviously I ran for office, but before that I got very involved in Hurricane Sandy, in the relief there. And that was a journey that I'm actually finally starting to write about it. Good. Because I hadn't done that. And just on a whim, I was traveling a lot in the last several months. Yeah. And on the planes, I just kept writing what happened. And I couldn't believe how much I remembered about it. Yeah. But basically, long and short of it, after Hurricane Sandy, I had an investment property in an area called Oakwood Beach, which we called that section Fox Beach. Okay. And I have a website, foxbeach165.com, that you can go on and you can see what the journey was all about, and how these ordinary people, ordinary citizens, we had a big meeting right after the storm, maybe 2 weeks after the storm. Yeah. And I had been doing a little bit of research and found out about how the government will buy your home pre-storm value after a storm like this. So everyone this is pretty much of a bungalow community at the time. There was some things that were a little bit bigger and stuff like that. But everyone, that was clearly their number one investment or asset in their family. And so to lose that, whether they had insurance or not insurance, was devastating. Yeah. So the buyout perspective for me as an investor was good, because as an investor, I didn't want to rent it out again, because my tenants lost everything that they owned. Except it was on their mattress. It floated to the top and floated back down. But the area, it's crazy. But the area, this was the epicenter of the storm, this Oakwood Beach, Fox Beach section. Yeah. So it had literally 15 feet of a wave of water that came through. And just walking through the neighborhood, because I didn't really know the neighbors, but seeing the devastation and seeing how people were completely helpless and had no place to go.
Didn't know what to do.
After I found out about the buyouts, I mentioned it at this community meeting a couple of weeks later. Said how many people would be interested, and like everybody raised their hand.
They were like,
I did not expect that, because in those 2 weeks of me mucking out the house and getting all the furniture and having sanitation come, I learned about this neighborhood that was multi-generational. You had grandmothers living across the street from their grandchildren, who just bought their house. They were there for 40, 50 years. They're never going to want to leave.
No.
But Sandy was a knockout punch. You had Irene, you had Isaac, 2 storms, 2010, 2011, 2012. Sandy comes. So when I saw that, I felt like I needed to do something. And after that meeting, when everyone raised their hand, I said, all right, I'm going to focus on that. So we formed a committee of 8 people, and NRDC did an article, and they said this is this man's biggest real estate transaction of his life. Because in the end, 550 people ended up participating. First in our community, it was 185, then 135 right behind that. And then 2 other communities came to me and asked me, how did we do it? And I tutored them, and they got involved, and they did it. So it was 550, which actually
That's
is
incredible.
Which is not my biggest transaction, but it's still pretty good, because I worked in investment banking. We did a lot. We did a lot of really big deals.
Got it.
But it was definitely the most significant thing that I'll ever do, and it really wasn't
impactful
my
too.
deal, but it was impactful.
Yeah.
So that just.
Well, Joe, just so you know, so over here where we are, so we're about, I want to say less than 5 minutes from where the eye of the storm was over here in Jersey. So in Maniloki.
So okay, yes,
right
Maniloki.
So,
I know someone who had property there, got significantly damaged.
So what happened in Fox?
Yeah.
Literally right 5 minutes from here, same thing.
Yeah, no, the devastation was amazing. So you have a Blue Acres program, so they did a lot of buyouts as a result of that. But this is the Jersey Shore, so a lot of people just like rebuilt, and they actually rebuilt bigger and better than ever.
Well, so what we want to happen in too, though, so yes, to your point, but there was probably, I want to say a little less than half of the people inherited those homes from their wealthy, let's call it estates.
Sure.
And so when this happened, because back then you didn't need to have the flood insurance.
Right.
And then this happened, and these people didn't have flood insurance.
Yep.
And so I know people who had now valued at like a $15 to $20 million home on beachfront property, because that's what this is over here. It's beachfront, and then lakeside's on the back.
Sure.
So because the lake connects to the ocean over there. Well, actually it doesn't. Now it did for a minute because of Sandy. But anyway, so I have friends who literally, like, their parents left it to them, right? They were like working their butts off to just be able to pay the taxes on it because the house was paid off, and they weren't doing the flood insurance because they didn't need to, and it's astronomical.
Yep.
And then Sandy happens, and then boom, now they can't fix it. They can't afford to fix it because it's millions of dollars.
Yes.
So they have to sell the land.
But even if they had the insurance, FEMA's only going to cover $270,000.
Right.
So
Which is not. It's not helping that house.
It's not going to help that house.
No.
But the land value, I'm sure, was still pretty much there.
But one of the questions that we kept getting asked for you was, you've been most people, whatever hometown around the country or around the world that they come from, most people want to get the F out of where they grew up. And they're like, I want to go somewhere else, and I want to start a life somewhere else.
Yeah.
What was it about Staten Island for you that said, I'm going to stay here, and I'm going to be, a Staten Islander?
Well, I always kid around and say that the answer to that is simple. I got a life sentence when I was born. So and I've been really good, but there's no parole, anything. You're here forever. So
you can leave if you want.
But Staten Island is it's actually, in my mind, it's still searching for its identity. It kind of lost its identity, I think, when the bridge was built.
Wow.
Which was the Verrazano Bridge, because it was basically, it was an airport before, but there were also farms all around there. I remember like 10 years after they built the mall and they started building some houses around there, the new people who came in were complaining about the pigs that lived next, but literally pigs.
Yeah.
Not like people pigs.
Yeah.
These are pigs.
Like actual pigs.
That way, and even cows, it was like, wow. So, you certainly can't expect that, not to change.
Yeah.
But, for the way, in such a short period of time, it changed overnight.
Right.
So it still has hidden gems and stuff that Derek was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
That are amazing.
Yeah.
They have. I don't want to leave anything out, but the first thing that comes into my mind is Richmond Town, which is a really cool preserved village that looks like it did in the 1700s.
Really?
Yeah. So it's like Williamsburg, Virginia, but it's a very small. It's a much smaller version of that.
I never even heard of this. This is on the island?
It's on Staten Island.
That's really cool.
Richmond
Okay.
Town. And they just got a new executive director there, well, just probably 4 years ago. And she's been doing a really wonderful job at having more and more events there and sharing it with the community.
Wow.
And so you have things like that. You have the Conference House, which is the southernmost part of Staten Island, which is the southernmost part of New York State.
Right.
That's as far south as it goes.
Yeah. And most people, real quick, sorry to interrupt you, but most people listening to this, because I hear this all the time, and I used to think this way when I was younger, when they think of New York, I mean the whole entire state.
Right.
They think of New York City. No, like a majority, overwhelming majority of people don't realize that there's upstate New York and then there's the suburbs of New York.
Yeah.
Most people that I speak to, right, that don't live here and never been to the city or in New York State, they're like, oh, I thought it was an entire state filled with massive, insane buildings.
Right.
Everywhere.
That's amazing. I've never actually heard that.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Literally, I can't even tell you how many conversations
Wow.
I've had like that.
Okay, yeah.
Yes.
Upstate is actually Staten Island was very much like upstate, again, before the bridge.
Right.
And maybe way before the bridge. But I can tell you some interesting part of history is that it was Teddy Roosevelt's favorite hunting ground.
Get out of here.
He used to hunt bear here. And
in Staten Island?
In Staten Island, yeah.
Bears?
That's
insane.
Yeah.
That's cool. I didn't
now
know
we
that.
have deer and we have, which no one believed up until like 10 or 15 years ago. Now it's a really bad problem. Deer are a really bad problem. They're in my yard all the time, which is like great. I used to take pictures. Now I want to take a different type of shot, not a photo shot. Yeah. But and turkey is a real problem.
Like the turkey vultures?
No, actual turkeys, wild turkeys.
Wow.
So they're not that wild. There's like swarms of them by Staten Island Hospital, which is in one of the buyout areas.
Yeah.
Next to Grand Beach, Ocean Breeze.
Yeah.
That's where they started. And there was literally hundreds of them on the grounds of Staten Island Hospital.
Wow.
But they've migrated out across the island, so you'll get like 20 or 30 of them crossing Highland Boulevard, the busiest, street on Staten Island, and everyone has to stop. So it hasn't caused an accident yet, but eventually something's going to happen, and they're going to have to do something about it.
Do you know I don't know if you know this offhand. I'm sure you might, but what's the square mileage of Staten Island? Do you know?
It's basically 13 miles by 5 miles.
Really?
Maybe a little bit more by that. Yeah, that's
wow.
it. Yeah. So.
That's crazy. So to think there's all that stuff there, like an old town still, there was farms and hunting there. That's so cool.
Oh, yeah.
I never realized the size of it. I knew it was smaller, but I didn't realize it was like that small.
Yep, it's that small.
Wow.
So, and we could always edit that out if I'm wrong about it. So
totally, yeah. If he's wrong, we're gonna post him up on billboards.
I'm pretty sure.
13 points. Like direct quote by Joe.
Has no idea what he's talking about.
but now let me ask you a question.
But let me just tell you about. I'll go a little bit back on the identity thing.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask you.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So the reason I say that is because, like, I'm going to give you an example. Staten Islanders are pretty hard people to win over.
Yes.
And actually, I've hired Adapting Social to bring that point in across that Compass, which is a New York City firm, everyone looked at a New York City firm, and it's also a nationwide firm, is a great thing for Staten Islanders.
Yeah.
Because what they do is we did this partnership so that, like I said, they came to me as a person first, who I am, and they want to be able to serve this community, and we do it in a very holistic, honest way.
Right.
But we're bringing technology, we're bringing their platform to Staten Island that really you can't get access to other than the platform. Now, there are other platforms that are good, I agree. Yeah. But this, to me, the reason I partnered with them 5 years ago was for that reason. And since 5 years ago, it's gone into the stratosphere of what they can do for a client. Right. So there's plenty of things that are amazing. But Staten Island, it's hard. I ran a bus ad.
Yeah.
When I first partnered with them.
Yeah.
And it was a really cool ad.
Yeah.
It was and it was around COVID time, unfortunately.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So New York City allowed us, instead of a 3-month thing, we ended up having them for a year. And so we went out there. And I did it on purpose. I knew what Compass was, but I figured people would Google Compass and figure out who we are.
About.
But when they Googled it and they looked at it, Staten Island was like, this can't be true. I had one guy call and I would play it, but I don't want to embarrass Staten Islanders, but I saved it. It was like, you can't kid a kid. What are you talking about, this concierge thing? It's bull.
Yeah.
It's bull.
Yeah.
Concierge is what we do is we used to lend up to $50,000. Now it's $25,000 to help fix your home, stage your home, do whatever you need.
Yeah.
We use that in the Joe Tirone team so successfully. The last 3 deals that we did, we did at least a portion of the concierge, where Compass lends you the money interest free.
Wow.
And then me and my team, because again, native Staten Islanders, we're here forever.
Yeah.
We have a whole list of contractors that we can recommend.
Yeah.
You don't have to use them. You can use your own. You can do it yourself if you want to. We can give you the money to do it. And then what that does is it really gives the house a pop. So we don't. Only once did we ever use more than $20,000.
Right.
But I'm really careful with that. I was a speculator before I just did typical real estate.
Right.
So I was one of the early ones in the 90s that were buying, fixing, and flipping.
Right.
And so I know when I look at a house, I know exactly if I start work here and it gets bigger and bigger and I open up this wall, I'm all I have is problems. So I try not to do any big renovation.
Got it.
But you would be absolutely amazed. We just did a house, 1.1 million, I think we sold it for. We only put $5,000 into that house.
To make it look better.
Just to make it look better.
Yeah.
And we also added, it had been listed for a while
Yeah.
and it was unsuccessful. For a year it sat there. And so we put $5,000 into the house, all based on our recommendation.
Right.
Some of it was even just decluttering, as simple as that.
Right.
$1.2 million house, you should not have to declutter.
No.
It should already be decluttered when it was listed.
Yes.
But for a year it sat there, right? And so we did that, and then we brought in professional photography. It has to have, any house should have professional photography.
Need it.
So, and we put that again on the Compass platform. The Compass.com is really, it's like they're challenging Zillow, in terms of how many people are actually utilizing that.
Use it, correct.
So we got, I think they had like maybe 17 showings for a year. We got, I think, that first weekend, like 70 showings, and we ended up getting like 10 offers.
Wow.
This is just and we adjusted the price a little bit, but this is just $5,000 and doing like what I call a buff and puff.
Yeah.
It makes such a difference, and people don't appreciate it. They don't
Right.
understand it.
Right.
And a lot of the agents don't ever think of something like that because
Yeah.
they see it's a house, they can sell it, and it may sell quickly,
Right.
but you're going to have to discount your price
Right.
to do that.
Right.
So, this guy calls and he says, "There's no way you're lending me money. You can't kid a kidder. Call me only if you're serious." Of course, I didn't call him because I'm not going to ever be able to turn that guy around. I'm good, but I'm not that good.
Yes.
But that made me realize that that's not a typical thing, but Staten Islanders really are very doubting.
Yes.
And I'll give you 2 examples. And both were failures. And both, I think, was because of the Staten Island attitude playing a role in that. It wasn't what killed it.
Right.
But there was, I don't know if you heard, when you think of Staten Island, what do you think of?
I think of
Staten Island Ferry is the answer, right?
Yeah, most likely, yeah.
That's the word you
think
think
of. That's the visceral,
of.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Staten Island Ferry. So people know all around the world Staten Island Ferry.
Yeah.
They may not know that it connects Manhattan to Staten Island.
Right.
Right. Where does it go? Where does the Staten Island Ferry go?
Right.
But when they did the wheel, this was about maybe 6 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was sort of involved in community meetings and stuff like that. I met the developer on a couple of things he came to talk about. And the other thing was the outlet mall.
Okay.
So it was called the New York Wheel, and it was called New York Outlets.
Okay.
Right? So I took exception to that. I didn't think, again, what is our identity? I feel like it's Staten Island, and people will know Staten Island, if nothing else, because of the ferry, if nothing else for that.
Right.
So I felt it should have been called the Staten Island Wheel. That was
Right.
one thing, and maybe that would have warmed people from Staten Island up to the concept of it.
Right.
But it was called the New York Wheel because
Right.
they were competing with the London Eye.
Ah.
The London Eye is the
Got it.
London Eye,
Right.
so let's make it the New York Wheel, right? So that sort of makes sense, but then again, who are we? Is the New York Wheel is on Staten Island.
Right.
And
Staten
so
Island
maybe,
Wheel.
yeah, it should have been the Staten Island Wheel. It should have
Yeah.
been the Staten Island Outlets, in my opinion.
Yeah,
All right,
yeah.
that's coming from a native Staten Islander who loves Staten Island.
Yeah.
And maybe the public say, you're crazy. And maybe it's Monday morning quarterbacking, And it certainly wouldn't have saved it because there was many other things that derailed both of them.
Right.
But I can tell you that in both cases, mostly native Staten Islanders, if you look at social media, we don't need a wheel. What do we need a wheel for? How much is it going to cost? Totally doubtful. It's horrible. It's terrible.
Right.
And it died, a pretty slow death. It had a bunch of different problems. A lot of it had to do with structural. When they sunk the footings, the building department came in and closed them down.
Right.
And then with the outlet mall, it coincided almost to the day that the COVID emergency was declared in March of 2020. And I think that opened up in maybe just January 2020.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of like that was kind of the death knell because people, couldn't travel, whatever.
Right.
Or couldn't shop, whatever.
Yeah.
But they certainly, everything was closed down.
Right.
So it got off to a bad thing. But again, I really feel that Staten Islanders should have had the name should have been there.
A say or something.
Yeah. Well, a say is they're not going to want it no matter what. But
right, that's
but
true.
What it's
That's
called.
true. That's true.
But I think it maybe would have warmed people up to it. So that always bothered me, and I felt that that I was right about it. You know, and I think in retrospect I was. I think it should have been. So now they're taking new RFPs now for where the wheel was. There's a garage there now, which was just closed down because they didn't really use it. The Ferry Hawks came in and they took over the Staten Island Stadium, which is a spectacular stadium.
Right.
What's called Richmond County Ballpark. And now it's Staten Island University Ballpark. And it has these spectacular views of Lower Manhattan. Right. So so I think they thought that maybe the people who would go watch the game would be using that, use that parking, but it didn't really work that well. I think, they had a better year last year in attracting people. Right. But again, that's sort of a thing where Staten Island was like, why do we need a ball team? We're very lucky to have it, So I was a big supporter of that. So so now in that area, in the St. George area, I got involved. I did a couple of deals with developers that are now looking to build, but they haven't built, but they purchased development pieces. And there is a lot that's going on in that Bay Street corridor. They made it for they made it for more affordable housing. Right. But after COVID and supply costs went up, there's really nothing's penciling. It's really hard to make something work.
It's difficult,
But there is so many things that are happening right now. Eventually, it's going to take off. Yes. And so there's one development that's right next to a piece that we had sold that did break ground. I think they had some problems with maybe soil issues or something like that. But I think Madison Realty Capital is going to bring 700 or 800 units of, I think, 80-20. So 20% affordable, maybe 30% affordable. Okay. And that's going to start changing things. It's going to be like a little city within itself, and that's pretty much right across from where the wheel was. Okay. Oh, was going to be. Yeah. So there are things that are going to happen down there. I'm still involved, not quite as involved as I was with commercial a couple of years ago. But I do believe that eventually, just by logistics alone, it's right on it's waterfront property. And I think the only problem right now is people are just holding out for really crazy prices, and they're anticipating what's going to happen and asking the prices from 2, 3, 4 years from now. Yeah. And with costs up, it's going to be hard to get those deals done. Right. So, but there's tremendous potential there. And Staten Island in general, I mean, people do come here. They it's still affordable. I mean, it's changed. Yeah. It's certainly changed. But when you compare to what the prices are, the crazy prices in Brooklyn, Manhattan, even Queens,
through the roof.
It's so to actually for a family to be able to have a yard, and a house, a detached home. But there's a lot of attached condos and stuff like that still fit the bill. Right. And more things are looking to develop where it would be more like condos and co-ops down again at North Shore. Yeah. Which I think will soon come to pass. So I think eventually it's gonna happen, but it's still a ways to go.
Yeah. So let's shift gears. We have so there's a lot of talk around this whole commission, NAR stuff. And you obviously, having the legal background you do, and you know a lot about the industry inside and out. What is your take on all this?
Okay, you're referring to the antitrust suit
Yes.
against NAR.
Yeah.
So there was a jury that awarded $1.8 billion against NAR and a couple of large brokerages.
Yeah.
Some brokerages actually settled, and
Okay.
they made payments
Wow.
already before the verdict was handed down.
And so for people who
And then-
are listening, who don't know what you're talking about, let's dumb it down for a second. So who got paid out for that?
So
1.8 billion.
Well, so it was a class action suit. So
Okay, so
there's
class
a lead,
action.
Yeah, there's
Got
a lead
it, got it,
plaintiff,
okay.
and we're going to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
A lot of people, for some reason, do not want to talk about that in the industry.
Why is that though?
Well, first of all, in my opinion,
Yeah.
I do think that was that guilty verdict was a little bit insane.
Yeah.
It didn't make any sense to me, and I think on appeal it probably will be reversed. Because then, basically it comes out of the jurors. I think that real estate in general is not really highly regarded. Let's put it that way.
Right.
Okay. So therefore, when you have the opportunity for these jurors to say, "Let me get back against this greedy industry," or whatever it is, they're guilty. And one of so the thing was they felt that the way NAR sets it up through the MLSs is that they set it up so that commissions, they were basically fixing commissions. That's where the antitrust comes in. And that, as an industry, we were conspiring to control commissions.
Right.
But that's not true at all. I mean, commissions are always negotiable.
Yeah, right.
But I got to tell you what I think happened, and no one's talking about this, and I have no idea why no one's talking about it.
Yeah,
because you got to go back into the history. How did it happen?
Right.
How were they so vulnerable that this could even happen?
Right.
And the way it happened was 20 years ago. There was another lawsuit that was won, and NAR lost, that created this issue of buyer's agency. So what does that mean? That means that 20 years ago, when you listed your house, and you listed it with your broker, your broker put it in the MLS.
Yeah.
When he put it in MLS, and he put it out there to syndicate it for other brokers and agents to sell that property, to help them sell the property.
Right.
Because MLS was now it was updated. It wasn't just your sheets anymore. It was actually online, all that stuff. And but even before that, when it was just the books, this is how it worked.
Right.
So that when that agent made their offer, they found a buyer. They advertised they had their buyers. They saw that listing on MLS, and they made the offer. They were acting as the broker's agent. So that means that they were acting in the best interest of that broker who was listing the property, right? Which means that they were really acting in the best interest of the seller, because the listing broker is representing the seller, and now he's out there and he's getting people as agents of him or her, and they are submitting their offers. So what happened 20 years ago is someone sued and said, "Hey, wait a minute, I just bought a house, and I just realized I was never represented. My broker, my agent, made the deal with the other broker, but he was actually representing the seller." And that made sense. But I can tell you, I remember, I'm going to sound like I'm an old guy here, but I remember that was never the philosophy. No one went out there when they showed the property, said, "Okay, listen, I'm really acting in the best interest of the seller here. Let me see if I can get my buyer up in price so I can help the seller out." It was always, they always had that relationship. That was a trusted relationship. So they felt, and the lawsuit felt that was a misuse of trust, that it didn't work that way. Because on paper, they're right. On paper, 100% they're right, and there had to be a change, because it really shouldn't be listed as and signed as a broker's agent, listing broker's agent, if you're really representing the person who's coming in to purchase it. So there was no conspiracy at the time. No one felt that, no one was taking advantage of anybody. That's just how it worked. So here's where the problem is. This is what the problem I have with NAR in general. Because a lot of times they do things because they just want to keep membership up. Because when you keep membership up, you keep dues coming in, they're all going to get paid. Goldberg is out now, but he was getting paid, what, $1 million a year or whatever, just to be whatever. plus.
Wow.
That's a light number.
Yeah.
But so they're always, they're trying to, it's a tough, needle to thread here because
it's a slippery slope almost.
It is because
Yeah.
you're advocating for
Yeah.
your agents, but you're really advocating if you're NAR
For the association.
You're
And the dues.
advocating for the association,
Got
but
it.
you also have a responsibility to the clients, to the
Yeah,
public.
yeah, yeah.
You do.
Yeah.
So that's where the slippery slope is. So when this happened
Yeah.
and they sued,
Yeah.
it created buyer's agency. So now that same buyer
Yeah.
is signing a document that says that agent
Yeah.
is his agent.
Okay.
So the buyer's agent is making the offer as the buyer's agent. So that
Right.
agent is making the offer as the buyer's agent. So that changed it, but it didn't change a thing. They kept the compensation exactly the way it was.
Nothing changed.
So nothing changed. In other
Got
words,
it,
so
okay.
let's say it was a 6% commission, 3% went
yeah.
across the rest of the country. Staten
Right.
Island doesn't work that way, but 3% would, let's say, just making up a number, would go to the listing broker and 3% would go to the
Yeah,
selling broker, who's the
6% total.
buyer's agent.
Yeah.
And it stayed that way, and nothing changed.
Right.
Nothing changed. But at that point, that is when, so now, as a result of this lawsuit, you're going to hear a lot of agents and brokers say, if you're listing your home, they're going to say, hey, you know what, John, don't worry about it. This
Yeah.
is not going to be settled for another 2 or 3 years.
Right.
It's down the road. Don't worry. If that person says that to you,
Yeah.
you need to say thank you for your time, and you
Yeah.
need to go to another agent. Because to me, everything changed with
Yeah.
that. So now you have to look at how are you going to compensate. That's the conversation. How are you going to compensate the buyer's agent?
Right.
All right? Because it really should be a decision of the seller, not of the listing broker.
Right.
The listing broker
Right.
shouldn't be saying, this is, okay, you're giving me 6%, I'm doing 3 and 3.
Right.
As a broker's agent, they could do that.
Right.
It was their commission.
Yeah. Right.
And they were sharing that commission.
That was split,
And
right.
yeah, the person who came as
Right.
an agent of that broker,
Yep.
they could do whatever they want, as far as
Totally.
I'm concerned.
Yeah.
All right? But now that it changed where it's a buyer's agent, the conversation 20 years ago should have changed, and it should have been very clear.
Right.
Every MLS should have made it very clear that it is the seller
Yeah.
that is going to decide how that split is. You negotiate your commissions are always negotiable.
Yeah.
The lawsuit, 2 things that are ridiculous. Is saying that they really were not negotiable and they
Yeah.
were controlling commissions. That to me is completely untrue.
Yeah.
The second thing is I watched this video of the lead plaintiff.
Yeah.
And he gets on TV and he's looking right at the camera and he's saying, I had to pay a buyer's agent, whatever it was, 3%
Yeah.
something, and I never met him.
Right.
I never met him. He didn't do anything for me, not one thing for me, and I had to pay him.
Right.
You know what he did?
Sold your house.
He sold his house. He sold his house.
Right.
He did something. He did something very important.
Yes. He got you the ability to sell your house by
Right.
finding the buyer.
Right. He
Right.
found the buyer.
He
He
did the work
connected you. You
to
don't
connect
need
the
to
buyer.
meet him. It's okay.
Right.
If you wanted to meet him and
Right.
you wanted to call him and say, I want to meet you, he would have met you.
Did you
Or
meet the
she
guy
would've
who
met you.
cooked your steak in the kitchen
Right,
at the
exactly.
restaurant?
I never met him.
I didn't meet. I'm not paying for this. I didn't meet the chef.
Right, exactly. It's ludicrous. I do think it's going to win on appeal
Yeah.
because then the rule of law will take over.
Yes. Yes.
A judge will decide, and I think that it has very little merit. I don't know how it got as far as it did,
Yeah.
other than the fact that I believe that unfortunately real estate is not held in too high regard
Yeah.
in many circles,
Right.
and that's really unfortunate because
It's like sales in general, right? If you're in a sales job,
Yes.
it's kind of similar, right? I would say those are the things.
it is, but the industry
sales.
does things that
Yeah.
that I don't think they should. Like, for instance, what really irks me, it always
Yeah.
did from day one.
Yeah.
I mean, I got into the business because I was buying and selling homes for myself.
Yeah.
So I decided to become a broker.
Okay.
So that I could, not just I would save the
Which is
commission,
smart. That's
but
smart.
that I can, thank you, so that I could market it the way I want to market it in the MLS, so
Right.
that my
Right.
property would shine. I wanted to have
Yeah.
control of that.
Yeah.
And so that's how I got into it.
Right.
But I noticed some things when I got in, and then I started hiring some agents. After a while, I didn't want to do that. It wasn't until
Yeah.
I got involved with Compass again where I
Right.
realized that I could really make a difference.
Yeah.
And help people find homes, sell homes, and stuff like that, and not just on my own. But one of the things that always irks me to this day.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever.
right.
When you see an A-frame in front of a brokerage, a real estate brokerage,
Yeah.
saying hiring today,
Yeah.
what does that tell you? Denny's is also hiring today. So is Sonic. They're hiring today.
Right.
How are they separating themselves?
Right.
So it is to me, it's the quality of the agents.
Totally.
That is really why. And it's certainly, it's not the majority of the agents that create this low regard that a lot of people have for the industry.
Right.
It's the ones that really aren't properly trained.
Well, that are also in and out typically.
And they can be in and out.
Well, I'm just saying most agents in America, right?
Yes.
At least from the data I've seen, in their first, they do it for about a year.
Yeah.
And they don't, because the one thing, and I'm curious for your perspective on this. I've worked with brokers, agents for 15 years or so, right? The one thing I've learned about real estate, it's the one sector, you could argue it'd be like, like any sales job, right? But it's the one industry where people, especially because of businesses like $1 Million Listing, you go online, you're on streaming, you're watching this TV show of Ryan Serhant and all these guys in nice suits, $1 million houses, multi-million-dollar houses, beautiful cars, gazillion-dollar watches, and it looks really sexy, right?
Sure.
And they're like, I want to do that. I want to dress nice. I want to go sell big homes and luxury and stuff. And then they get into it, and then it's different like any other business, because the ones I see successful, like yourself, they take their real estate business and run it like an actual business, like an actual LLC'd business, where the overwhelming majority of people who get in for it for the look and lavish and all this other stuff, they wind up coming in, they jump out very quickly because they realize in real estate, if you aren't selling, there's no base pay, there's no this, that. It's like you ain't out there hunting, you ain't eating.
Yeah.
And so the one thing is that it's the industry where people come in and they don't know as much about running it like a business. And I see when you're talking to people, like perfect example, we have an agent that, we just probably started working with probably like maybe less than 6 months ago. And we were building their website, but the guy was like, oh, I'm folding up. I'm stopping doing real estate. And the guy, that's his account manager was like, hey, okay, no problem. Like, what happened? Like, oh, it was tougher than I expected. Mm-hmm. So, boom, like jumped into that vertical. But what is your perspective on that in terms of just people just jumping into real estate and then in a way almost kind of giving it a bad rap then, I guess, because
it does. But here's the thing. This is what's frustrating about it is because as a broker, probably the best business plan you can have, the way it works, is you get your broker's license and you start hiring as many people as you can. And whatever sticks on the wall, just keep throwing it.
Right.
You're going to, and there are a lot, especially on Staten Island, there's brokerages that have hundreds of agents that make a tremendous amount of money doing that. But I personally think that is one of the problems, because you can't possibly inspire the agents in the right way or train the agents in the right way, or all of them. It's just impossible. And so I think that the fact that there's so many part-timers in this industry is really what disparages it. Yeah. Because you can't, they could be the greatest person ever. You could be the kindest, most honest person. Right. And really not know what to do. Now in New York, there's two things that they're going to be faced with this year. And I think that there is going to be a shakeout. A lot of people are saying, oh, nothing's going to happen, things are going to change. Real estate's going to survive. There's no question about it. The industry's going to survive. Right. But there is going to be a change, in my mind, because you have the two things. You have the antitrust thing, and you have to understand what it is to compensate a buyer's agent. What are you going to do? Right. And both sides of that, because if there's a way to look at it where if some people read the lawsuit, they say, okay, that's amazing. Now the seller no longer has to compensate the buyer's agent. That's going to come from the buyer, right? Now maybe in Missouri where the lawsuit was, that might make sense because prices are so low and how much does it really cost and stuff like that. But in New York, where prices are 3, 4, 5 times that amount, how can a buyer do that? You're going to limit the purchasing power by limiting the purchasing power. Totally. By limiting that purchasing power, you're going to reduce the price. So what did the seller gain? What analysis is going to be out there that's going to say that prices are that commissions are actually come down, or the net to the seller is going to be higher as a result of this? I disagree with that. But you have to understand what it means to compensate the buyer's agent. What is it customary in your market area? And what do you have to do when you're a seller? How do you offer it out? And then as a buyer, what are your options? So you have to know that. So I'm training my team. And I'm not just like making it up. I am.
You're on quality control.
I'm talking to in-house counsel. I'm
Yeah.
talking to attorneys in Staten Island, fellow brokers. I am putting together the most information possible
Yeah.
to be able to educate my client.
Yep.
And have them navigate this in the best possible
Yeah.
way. There's
Yeah.
not many people that are doing that because there's so many people that are saying, it's not going to happen for 2 or 3 years. Don't worry about it. Let's not even talk about it. Just give me your listing and this is what we're going to do.
Yeah.
That's terrible.
Yes.
You can't do that.
Right.
But that's going to happen.
Right.
So there's 2 things that are going to literally shake out in New York is a new thing that was just passed by the state legislature.
Mm.
And that's this property condition disclosure statement.
Right.
Now, I was behind the scenes working on this
Yeah.
with NRDC, National Resource Defense Council,
Yep.
EDF, Environmental Defense Fund. I don't sound too much like a Republican when I talk about it, but I have been.
Yeah.
And the reason is because of my work with Sandy.
Yeah.
One of probably the number one thing when I spoke with, out of the 550, probably at least 200 of the residents,
Yeah.
the number one thing
Yeah.
was the fact that they bought in an area that they had no idea was a flood zone. They didn't know what it meant. And how they found out was flood insurance premiums were so low at the time, they were only like an additional, let's say, $20 a month.
Okay.
So at the closing table, like the attorney and the broker were laughing and say, hey,
$20.
Yeah, what are you worried about?
Come
And they were
on.
like, okay, I guess that's not too bad. But what does a
Right.
flood zone mean? It means
Right.
you're in a flood zone. That's what it means.
Yeah.
They didn't tell them
Right.
that house had flooded 5 years before, or the area had flooded, especially in the Fox Beach area.
Yeah.
There were huge storms, 38,
Yeah.
50s, 60s.
Right.
92 was a big storm.
Right.
That had like 5 or 6, but no one knew that.
Right.
So when these people came to me, I said, we have to figure out flood disclosure.
Right.
So I went to my local board. I went to New York State Association of and NYSAR, and I tried to convince them that we need to lead the charge with
Yes.
flood
Okay.
disclosure.
Okay.
And I said we need to, for 2 reasons. Number one, it's the right thing to do because it really bothered me.
Yeah.
When I saw listings after the storm of 2012,
Yeah.
and I saw listings 2014,
Not disclosed.
brand new utilities,
Wow.
new furnace, new water heater.
Why they knew?
Yeah, right. And I'm like, how can we do that? And I would go to
Right.
the board meetings and say, how can we do this?
Yeah.
And they said, what, do you want us to lead the charge and
Yeah.
be the only one that does this?
Yeah.
And the answer to me was yes,
Yeah.
we should.
Clearly,
And then,
yeah.
so then I ended up working in 2015 with the New York City Mayor's Office of Resiliency and Recovery, a
Yeah.
woman named Catherine Gregg.
Right.
And then I formed a committee, in our local board, and we put together what I thought was a great document, 1-pager of flood disclosure that we were ready to launch with the city council, the state legislature. We're trying to figure out where are we going to do it.
Yep.
And then she left.
Ah.
She went to be a fellow at some
Jeez.
university.
Right.
So, and then whoever took her, we don't know anything about this.
Yeah.
But it was really a good document. I still have the
Still have it.
document.
Okay, good.
But it's meaningless because the second reason I wanted them to be involved is I said, the state legislature is going to put something together that we're not going to agree with. We're not going to have a seat at the table.
Yeah.
And let's be a part of that conversation.
Yeah. Before you
But-
get kicked out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before what happens did happen.
Yeah.
So Senator Hoylman in New York City,
Yeah.
he was approached by NRDC, EDF, Waterfront Alliance, and
Yep.
they wanted this disclosure. So the way he did it is there is on record, if you go DOS and you
Yeah.
look at on the DOS, you're going to see a property condition disclosure statement.
Yep.
But what's happened for the last almost 20 years is you can opt out of that as a seller by giving a $500 credit. So you
Okay.
don't have to fill out
So I'm
buyer
not doing
beware,
it.
bring in your engineer, leave us alone, here's $500.
Okay.
And how did that happen? Got to go back to history on that. When flood disclosure was passed 15 years ago or 20 years ago, I can't remember
Yep.
exactly when. Once it got passed, the law lobbyists got involved and said, listen, this is New York City.
Right.
If you make these clients fill out this disclosure on the property itself.
Yeah.
Now, in that disclosure statement was a small paragraph about flood disclosure.
Okay.
So when NRDC found out that the only disclosure you could get out of by doing $500,
Right.
they attacked that waiver
Mm.
rather than bring in what I wanted a standalone thing.
Yes.
Because I'm not convinced that is not going to be a problem. going forward, that it's going to be, New York is much more litigious than anywhere else.
Sure.
That are you ever really done with your transaction?
Right.
So, so what they did is after
Yeah.
it was passed 20 years ago, a month or two later, they did an amendment which allowed for this $500 waiver. So this amendment was introduced where they did the $500.
Yes.
So what they did this time
Yeah.
is they said, okay, you know what? Let's get rid of the amendment.
Okay.
And let's go back into the disclosure statement
Right.
and let's broaden it.
Okay.
Let's add another page or two about flood disclosure.
Okay.
And that's what they did. So exactly what I predicted 8 years ago when I said we got to get involved is what happened,
And then
because
shakes
this
up.
is a really onerous, and they are looking at it like, okay, it's no big deal. I spoke to a couple of agents who said,
Yeah.
yeah, I heard about it. Yeah, I know. Yeah, the seller has to fill it out. We don't have to get involved in it.
Right.
And even I think they were told by the board counsel, do not get involved in filling that out because it specifically states
Yeah.
that it has to be filled out by the seller.
Right.
But we're always trying to prove our worth.
Right.
Are we going to prove our worth by saying, oh, we have nothing to do with that?
Yeah.
You have to give them resources to find out if they're in the 500-year flood
Right.
plain. So there's a whole list of things of what you have to do,
Yeah.
and it's really onerous. I think it's great on the flood part, but then the rest of it, when the disclosure talks about the house
Yeah.
and all the things that you're guaranteeing there's no material defect.
Right.
What does that mean, material? So what I did is
difficult.
I've met with a couple of attorneys here in Staten Island.
Yep.
And I'm putting together, I already contacted my state legislator.
Yeah.
That I work pretty closely with, and I have a list of questions for them to clarify how this is going to work going forward. And so one of the things is to define what a material defect is,
what is
because
that?
in New Jersey they have the disclosure,
Yeah.
but they actually explain and define
Yeah.
what material means. So there's certain things that still have to get done. It's not being looked at as closely as it should.
Right.
And again, that's going to be an agent who's selling, and
Yeah.
the seller has to fill it out. How about when you're purchasing?
Yeah.
How do you look at that document and guide your client through that transaction?
Right.
You really have to know what you're doing.
You have to.
And now at this point, a lot of agents have no idea about mechanicals, no
Yes.
idea about renovations.
In most
Zero.
cases, none.
Right. So
In
now
most
you're going to
cases.
get this document. How are
Yeah.
they going to advise it? Or going to
Right.
talk to the attorney? Or they're going to have an engineer that's going to come in?
Right.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
But you need someone to guide you through the transaction.
Yes.
So now more than ever, in my mind,
Yeah.
it's always been leading up to this. In my mind, right now is the time where you really need a professional. You need someone who has been through other scenarios.
Yep.
Where markets have changed.
Yep.
Because we're in a changing market. Rates
are.
just went all the way up. Now they're going. Are they going down? Everyone said they're going
What's that?
down.
We don't know.
I don't know if they're going down.
It's like the weather. Stick your head out the window.
Yeah, right. I mean, it was ridiculous when they said after COVID that, okay, the trillions have been absorbed and rates are going to go down. When
Right.
rates went from 2 to 2.5 and they were at 6,
Yeah.
everyone was predicting, okay, they're going to level off at 4 or 5 by the end of
Right,
the year.
right.
And then my just knowledge of economics, that's impossible. That's not how it works.
Right.
When you have $7 trillion in the system
Yeah.
and someone starts spending that money, the person who gets that money or the people that get that money start spending that money.
Yeah.
Supply chain goes down. And that's how inflation happens. It gets
Right.
worse and worse. It builds when the money gets in, it doesn't just evaporate.
Right.
It works its way through the system.
Right.
So I had a really strong feeling that rates were going to continue to go up. And they did.
Yeah.
Higher than I imagined.
even
But
thought,
I
right.
never thought they were going to come
8%
back
or 7.
down.
Right. Right.
And so now they went from 8 down to 6.5 now
Yeah.
or something. Is that going to be a trend or not? I
Right.
don't know.
Right.
But you need someone in the market that can
Yep.
help you get your best possible deal.
Yeah.
Help you to make sure that you're going to get pre-qualified at the best possible scenario, so they can use that pre-qualification.
Yeah.
That's going to be your weapon or whatever to use to the seller to compete with someone
Right.
else's offer. You have
Yeah.
to be able to substantiate why your offer is better.
Yeah.
And it just brings a whole new thing. So I think part-timers don't belong in this business.
Yep.
And that is, I'm always the contrarian.
Yep.
Everybody, Joe Tirone, what's he going to say now, right?
The devil's advocate.
But devil's advocate. But I really don't believe that, I'll end by saying that in the late 1800s,
Yeah.
when NAR was established, it was
Yeah.
established for a really good reason. It was the
Yeah.
Wild West, and people were getting ripped off by real estate
Yeah.
agents.
Yeah.
Because there's no real control over it.
Right.
So they created what process, and what they did was they did a mission statement. The mission statement was they were going to serve the realtors.
Yep.
and with a big interest in the public.
Yeah.
To make sure it was under the public's interest, best interest.
Right.
And that was great. And they created a whole series of things to do, which is to be how you get to be qualified to be an agent, how you had to continuing education. All that stuff was great, except it was extremely lax. You compare that few years difference, maybe 10 years difference, the AICPA was formed for the same reasons. Accountants were ripping off people. It was a Wild West there. So they created the AICPA, and they had the same exact mission statement.
Wow.
It was amazing.
Wow.
But look at their criteria. Not only is it really difficult to become a CPA, because the test is, I was in the CPA prep program at Pace University. We never talked about my education. CPA prep at Pace University and an MBA in finance in St. John's, where I taught economics in 2007, 2008.
Right.
But not only that, you have to put 2 years of experience in before you're considered a CPA.
Yeah.
You have to have the experience. You have to pass the exam, and then for 2 years work in the trade and prove that you're capable for that.
Right.
When you see these A-frames, they pass their test.
Yes.
Go out and talk to Aunt Millie and get that listing.
Get it done. Right.
And you're gonna get it.
Right.
Because people trust a relative or like that.
Yes.
But that always just like grates at my nerves, because I know it's like all done on the best possible circumstances, but it also allows for people who are not so honest into the industry
just to get
as well.
Right in. Right.
So I really feel that these two things, are going to have an impact, especially here in New York.
Yeah.
Between whatever the ramification is going to be from that lawsuit, are agents going to be able to rise to the occasion? I hope that they are.
Right.
And I know that there's certain ones will. There's plenty of really good agents on Staten Island.
Yep.
And then with this property condition disclosure statement, is that going to somehow trip up most of the agents or many of the agents?
Right.
And I believe that it will.
And shake out the
and I think there will be a little bit of a shakeout.
Good.
So I think, and then what I think ultimately, what could eventually change, you talk about totally devil's advocate, is dual agency. That may be a byproduct of what happens with this antitrust.
Yeah.
Because
that would make sense.
One of the things I learned in investment banking, when I was an investment banker for several years, First Boston, is that your interests have to be aligned with your client in order to be a successful transaction.
Totally.
In dual agency, it's really hard to say that they're always aligned.
Yeah.
If you're getting the best possible price and you're providing both, you're the seller's agent, and then you're representing the buyer as well, and you're getting the best possible price, then you have done that.
Yeah.
But what about the case where you're a dual agent and your buyer is a little bit below than what another agent is offering?
Right.
The less scrupulous agents will try to get their deal done. Why?
Right.
Because the interests aren't aligned. Even though the seller would get more with a higher offer, that agent will double potentially their income if they take a lower price. That is not interests aligned.
Got it.
That's just one example.
Yeah.
I just think dual agency is something that the industry really has to look at.
Yep.
They try to put checks and balances and controls on it, but I think that's one thing that part-time agents are going to start to fall off, and then dual agency, to me, is going to be at risk over the next several years. Wow. I don't know how it's going to shake out, but I can tell you that's one thing I've always been uncomfortable with.
Yeah, but we got you here on record saying it, so it's cool.
Yeah,
we have to have you back on, and I want to check in. We're going to have to do like an annual podcast with you.
Okay.
Where we come back in and we check in on everything. But the one thing I do want to say, though, Joe, I have such respect for you as a professional, because I haven't known you for a long time, but for the short time that I have known you and having conversations like this, when you're dealing with, some of your biggest investments in your life, which is your home, or it could be a rental prop, whatever it is.
Sure.
It's a lot of money, and you said it earlier, but I do want to say that it's so evident that you are such a high integrity professional.
Thank you.
And that's not easy to do. All the things that you're talking about, like, and everybody listening, hearing these really cool acronyms that you right? It's like the reality of the scenario is that you're fighting for what's right. And to have, that representation of your property it's a no-brainer, right? Because you clearly have the integrity and the best interest, not only of yourself, because you don't have to be out here doing all this stuff. You don't need to be doing this, right? You've had your family business in town forever. You've been in real estate for a long time, but you're fighting for clearly what's right and what's integral. And I've dealt with so many people, just not in real estate, but just in business, where they will sell their mom to get a deal done, and you are the complete opposite of that. And I think it says so much about your character, and I want to go on record saying that because I think it's so important. I know so many people, and that you said it earlier, real estate people are not high regarded, and it's because not many real estate people are like you. They don't have that high integrity. They're not going to go when the crowd's going one way. They're not going to go and defy the crowd to do what's right. And I think that's what you are about. That's your integrity, and that's such an amazing thing, to be able to say, well, I don't have to think 1 ounce about what Joe and the Tirone team are doing because Joe's at the helm. There's no way that they're not going to act in my interest and just get a deal done, get to make commission. So I just wanted to say that because I think it's such an important thing, and it's an asset to you and the Tirone team. Is that you guys are, you particularly, right? I don't know your team as well as I know you yet, but it's like you lead with such integrity, and I think that's such an amazing thing.
I appreciate that, and I got to tell you that I had my father and my 2 uncles drilling that into me from when I was 12, and I was still working at First Boston Investment Bank, and was still helping him, during the summer school rush. So I had that, and I appreciate it, and actually it does make me feel great. Our last few testimonials from clients have been exactly that. That scenario, they felt like they were really 100%.
They're happy. They knew they could trust you.
The trust was always there. The expertise they felt that we had was above and beyond, and the service was incredible. And I was always been a service type guy, where I think that's number one. And again, always making sure that my interests are aligned with my clients. And it's a wonderful thing. It's a good feeling to have. That's how I did with the buyouts. I did the buyouts because our interests were aligned. I had a home that was destroyed just like they did. And so I was able to advocate for them for all the right reasons. There was no wrong reason for me to do that. They couldn't question anything. What is this guy doing here? Why is he here? Well, the guy, he lost his house too.
He's one of us. He's one of us.
He's one of us. So that's how I always operate. That's how I treat my agents. Good. I have our newest agent. That's how I actually taught Kevin Bryant, who's also my son-in-law. And I know I tortured him for the first year that he was there, but I was just telling him what I feel is important to be successful in transactions.
You have to these days.
And it's knowledge, and it's trust, and it's being trustworthy. And always try and do the right thing, and your customer is always right. And like I told you, that my father and my uncles always said, but again, it's what is right for the customer too. What can we 100%. Do to go that extra step? And that's what we do. And brought Derek on about 4 or 5 months ago. He hasn't done a deal on his own yet because we don't. That's not how I train my.
You need to know first.
So Kevin went through that, and now Derek is going through that. He's just about ready to go, and we're really excited about what he can bring to the table because he's really smart, very, very compassionate. We all have compassion here. And really wanting to deliver for the client. And that's the main thing. The money comes just organically. When you think that way, the money just comes.
It'll follow you.
It's going to follow you. So thank you for saying that. I
meant it, Joe. And so now, but last point here is, where can people find you? Talk about your website. Like if someone wants to, if someone's on the island or wants to buy in the island, how do they contact you?
Okay, so you could either go through the website, the Joe Tirone team, .com, obviously, or you can call me on my cell phone, 917-913-2857. You could also go on Compass.com and just go Google Staten Island. We're gonna pop up.
They'll find you,
and you'll find us. But again, the relationship that we have with Compass is key, and it really has been it has propelled us wonderfully. And it really allowed us to really do what I want to do, which is serve the clients in the best possible way. And by using their platform, their technology, and then using our know-how, our knowledge of the neighborhood, it's such a great match. I can't tell you.
It's like a match made in heaven. Over
it really is wonderful. It's just great to be part of it.
So we'll just have you end with that. But that's awesome though.
That's great.
And honestly, the combination, the more and more I hear, and like I'm talking to obviously your team on my team here. The combo of you two was just awesome. It really was such a good thing.
It really is a good thing. And they knew it more than I did.
Of course.
Well, they dragged me in.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know.
So match made in heaven.
Yeah.
And obviously both are aligned. What you want for the customer, your client,
Yeah.
and what they can bring to the table.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So
and we're going deeper and deeper into that, because now one of
Yeah.
the things that we're able to do, and we've been doing very successfully,
Yeah.
is doing referrals in other states.
Good.
And
Good.
so that if a client is moving to Pennsylvania or Cincinnati or wherever,
Right.
we can help them. We can set them up with a like-minded agent.
Yes.
And it's not like, okay, let me just call this person and see who's available.
Right.
We're going to call, my team's going to call, we're going to vet each one.
Right.
But in Compass, it really, they're hiring, like I talked about before with the
Yeah,
A-frames,
yeah.
their hiring is very, very strict.
Yeah.
And they turn down probably more than they actually accept.
Wow.
And so
That's
it
good.
makes me very confident that
Yeah.
when I'm doing a referral, that I'm going to go to someone, again, who's like-minded, who's able to handle that. And then the reverse is true, too. They'll call us and say, we have a client that's either selling on Staten Island, looking to buy on Staten
Yeah.
Island. And so we are really the go-to team here. We're the only team in Compass that
Yeah.
is 100% on Staten Island.
Oh, nice.
And, yeah. So
Good. Okay.
So that's
That's a huge benefit, obviously, to your guys.
Yeah.
Your guys' clients.
Yeah. So
awesome.
the synergy between Compass and the Joe Tirone team
That's
is a
incredible.
wonderful thing.
Yeah.
And I'm in contact with management there quite often.
Good.
And we
Good.
talk about stuff all the time.
Yeah.
And
That's
and
amazing.
we're looking forward to another 5 years. I've spent 5 years last
Yeah.
week. So
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So another 5.
Yeah.
And actually, funny enough, this is Breaking Barriers 50 year. I
Is
started
that
the
right?
podcast 5 years ago.
Oh, okay.
So too funny. So we're lining up here
That's
5
great.
years.
I love it.
But
I love
you know what? I want to also just thank you, Joe, and obviously your team who's here with you as well. Time is the one asset we don't get back, right? So you being
Yeah.
here with us, talking about this amazing things, that people don't want to talk about in real estate. Talking about the things that people are ignoring. Also, just again putting out your story, fighting for what's right. I'm super grateful for your time. So thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me. I really
Yeah.
appreciate it, John. This has been great.
We'll be back. You're gonna come back. We got to do this again.
I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks, Joe.
Okay.
Boom.
Thank you.